What does this mean for us back here in Florida? Here now, State Representative CGS, Carlos Guillermo Smith, Democrat from District 49 in Orlando, the first openly gay Latino to be elected to the legislature, focused on the ramifications here in the Sunshine State. All right, so the ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, what does this mean for Florida right now?
Well, this is a tremendous ruling for LGBTQ Americans across the country. The Supreme Court basically affirmed that much of what we as advocates have argued for a long time, which is that anti-LGBTQ discrimination is sex discrimination and is illegal under federal law. So this Supreme Court ruling's impact is immediate, and every American and every Floridian can actually now rest assured that they can no longer be fired or denied employment simply for being LGBTQ. Florida is one of a handful of states that did not have state law that expressly prohibited anti-LGBTQ discrimination in the workplace. And now that is the law of the land in all 50 states. But it doesn't mean that we don't have a tremendous amount of work to still do. Florida is still a state that allows legal discrimination against LGBTQ people in housing, in public accommodations, in healthcare, even in education. And so we, as a legislature, the onus is on us to enact many of these important protections, even in the wake of this ruling, so that it's not dragged into the 21st century again by some future Supreme Court ruling. But we actually believe that a lot of the wording of the majority opinion in this Supreme Court ruling basically suggests that some of these protections already exist in federal law, but it will have to be litigated, which is why it's important for the Florida legislature to step forward and enact comprehensive legislation, not only to necessarily codify this ruling on LGBTQ workers, but also to make sure that they're protected in other areas of public policy.
I'm so glad, Representative, that you cleared the record emphasizing this is about an employment situation only, not other facets. People from the LGBTQ plus community can still be discriminated against at a restaurant or trying to get a living arrangement, an apartment, a house, whatever. Let me ask you this, though. Critics point out that the highest court is basically legislating from the bench. They are not elected officials. They are appointed. So would you say that that's the case in this situation or in the past?
Not at all. You know, the way that Gorsuch, the actual Trump appointee to the Supreme Court, even though the Trump administration in this case was the defendant and they were opposing allowing for these protections to happen, Gorsuch chose his words very carefully, and he argued that anti-LGBTQ discrimination is sex discrimination. And it can be put very simply with one example. I am a man who has a job, I'm married to a man, and my employer doesn't like the fact that I'm married to a man and fires me because of that. The argument made by Justice Gorsuch is that that discrimination would not have taken place if I were a woman, a female employee that was married to a man. So the discrimination is inherently sex discrimination, which should also extend to LGBTQ workers, which is what they said and what they did with this ruling.
So let me ask you this. What do you say to Democrats who are against Gorsuch, saying, no, he leans Republican, he leans conservative, and now they're saying, you know what, my bad, it's okay that he's up in the high court?
Well, there's no question that some folks were surprised by this opinion by Gorsuch, and Democrats had many important reasons to oppose his nomination, but it just goes to show, and we hope that this is the case also with the ruling on DACA, allowing for the Dreamers to be able to stay in the United States still temporarily, although we need a legislative solution, that this court may be unpredictable on certain issues and could surprise us often as a check on the Trump administration for the time being.
Talk to me about the religious part of this, okay? We hear a lot of times that religious institutions do not fall under that same umbrella, that they are more free, if you will, to do whatever they want.
Well, what we still have is what we call RFRAs in state law, like in Florida, which is basically a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which protects folks to be able to engage in their religious freedoms. But when it comes to employment, the way that the courts have always translated and interpreted that religious freedom is that religious institutions can only assert religious freedom in the hiring and firing practices of those who conduct ministerial duties. But for example, if a religious institution wanted to hire a custodian to perform non-ministerial duties on their property, that these types of civil rights protections would still apply. But it brings up another important debate in Florida that we've had this year around vouchers and how private religious schools that are funded by taxpayer money have been able to get away with for quite some time expressly discriminating against LGBTQ students. And they have made similar arguments about religious freedom being what allows for them to say that they can expel a gay or transgender student just for that reason. That debate is ongoing, and it's important for the legislature to act, because at the end of the day, if these institutions receive taxpayer money, as private schools who participate in the voucher program do, they should be open to all students, including LGBTQ students.
Is there one or two, very quickly, religious entities or schools that you want to name right now as those who have actually gone against the grain and have been inclusive, that you have known and worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, right here in Orlando, Bishop Moore, which is a private school, a Catholic private school, has really led the way and demonstrated that religious freedom and LGBTQ rights are not mutually exclusive concepts. They have policies in writing that prohibit discrimination against students and staff based on sexual orientation, and they have a very inclusive message. They're kind of leading the way and showing that these are not two concepts that can't coexist. And I think that they are a good model. But it's unfortunate because the Orlando Sentinel's reporting has discovered that at minimum 83 private schools in the state of Florida have in writing policies that say things like students who say I am gay or I am trans will be expelled. Those private schools receive taxpayer money through vouchers, and we need to clean up and reform our voucher program to prohibit that if they are going to receive taxpayer money.
State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ebeth.